let's spend a minute talking about, I mean, this is one of the best tips you've ever told us, and it works like a charm. And that is move up your tomatoes in size. If you go to the nursery, you buy a tomato in a 4-inch pot or the jumbo pack, which is actually a smaller soil volume per plant, and those 6-packs, get them out of there when you get home and plant them in a bigger pot. You could plant them from that into a 1-gallon pot, let them sit in a protected place and be happy in that pot for another 3, 4, 5 weeks or whatever, because it's going to develop a root system that's going to really give that plant a head start.
Yeah, keep them moving. I mean, that's really crucial. They're a very vigorous vine, and their roots will go quite deep. Tomato roots can go 3 to 4 feet deep if the soil allows it. And the plants are very vigorous. And when you leave them in that little 4-inch pot sitting on your porch waiting for the soil to be warm enough, they get very, very root bound. I have planted those out with adequate results. I tear those roots apart when I put them in. I mean, people watch what I'm doing. They think I'm going to hurt the plant. And I say, no, in the long run, it'll be a much better plant, but by far the best thing to do. Take it home. You know, those 6-packs, honestly, we're really frustrated with them because you get really root bound plants. Get them into the next size up, whatever it is. If it's a 6-pack, go up to a 4-inch or a quart pot size. Ultimately, most of mine, when they go in the ground, are in 1-gallon containers. Doesn't matter how big they get. Doesn't matter if they're 2, 3, 4 feet tall at that point. Drop them down deeper. All your friends who grow tomatoes will tell you to do that. It works. They root out the stem, and you get a nice, well-established plant, but keep them moving so they don't get stunted by being root bound.
How much space do you need between tomato plants to stop cross-pollination?
If you really want to carefully save an heirloom or an open pollinated type, it's more a matter of protecting the flower after you've hand pollinated it. Because bees, and particularly bumblebees or the carpenter bees, which are very common in our area, the xylocopa bees, will go quite a distance from one tomato plant to another. Well, tomatoes are self-pollinating. They don't need bees. They pollinate simply by vibration. The risk is that that carpenter bee or that bumblebee went to your early girl and now came over to your berries crazy cherry, and you happen to save that fruit. Now you have a hybrid. So what you do is you tickle the flower, no matter how close it is to the others, because they got to be anywhere in the same garden would be problematic. And then you cover it with cheesecloth or some little mesh bag or something, so you know which fruit you've saved, which you've carefully hand pollinated, and you've prevented it from cross pollinating. It's not hard to do. It's not hard to save your own seed. But if you're like Fred Hoffman or Don Shore and you've got 30 different varieties out there, you may get some interesting hybrids if you aren't careful about how you save your open pollinated seed.
Exactly. And yeah, that's a good idea too. And you don't have to bag each piece of fruit or every flower. You just the 1 or 2 you want to save for seed.
Right. And you don't need that many. And almost any of these will produce a surprising amount of seed. And of course, you can always buy a new plant next year at your local garden center. But I do have customers where they have a lot of trouble with sun scald on the fruit. And a couple of years ago, we had an extreme heat event, September 2022. In Davis, it got to 116 degrees 2 days in a row, absolute record. Then it was 110 for 2 days in a row, and then it was 106 for 3 days in a row. If your tomatoes were under irrigated, they fried right out there in the garden. That was really, really hot, but 1, we can anticipate that will probably happen again at some point in the future. And 2, if you shield it a little bit from that 5 o'clock sun, the hottest time of day, let's say 4 o'clock on, with some shade cloth or position it such that there's a pluary tree or something, giving it a little shade in the afternoon, you can get your fruit through. But also a bit of standard advice I'm finding myself giving, which I wasn't giving 20 years ago. If it's close to ripe and we're going to have an extreme heat event, pick the fruit. Bring it into the house, set it on the counter, let it ripen there. It will ripen properly over 5 to 7 days indoors, even if it's just blushing to color, even if it isn't yet fully colored up for the ripeness. You can let it ripen indoors. If you leave it out in the garden in extreme heat, here's what happens. The plant's metabolism changes and it slows down the ripening, and the fruit is more vulnerable to sunburn. Indoors, under even temperature conditions, it ripens the way it's supposed to. So if there's any question about the weather, let's say you're listening in a rainier climate or a place where you have sudden dips in temperature, but especially high temperature, bring it into the house when any of that kind of weather threatens and just let it continue ripening on the counter.
I did ask the Facebook people who follow Get Growing with Farmer Fred and asked them, okay, what tomato did you really like from 2023? And I did get a reply from somebody whose opinion I respect. He's a high school horticulture teacher, and he said he loved Purple Boy. And so, okay, well, that's good enough for me. I'll give that a shot. So I've got some Purple Boy seedlings coming up now.
I'm writing it down as we speak.
I will tell you what the park's catalog says about Purple Boy.
Purple Boy.
And by the way, I believe the seed is still available from Totally Tomatoes if you're looking for it. They call it intriguing color and delectable flavor. Thank you very much. 80 days to maturity. It's an indeterminate. And here we go with the Playboy Playmate of the Month description. This new tomato combines all the true homegrown tomato tang flavor of the heirloom Cherokee Purple, but with an improved disease resistance package. So now, where Cherokee Purple was under high disease pressure and did not grow well, this hybrid can be grown and enjoyed all summer long. The Purple Boy hybrid tomato is resistant to nematodes, verticillium wilt, fusarium wilt, and tobacco mosaic. Slightly ridged and very symmetrically shaped, these stunning violet purple tomatoes combine juiciness with strong tomato tang, the type unknown to those rock-hard supermarket varieties. Boy, that's a cheap shot at supermarket tomatoes.
Yeah. Well, of course, they have to pick supermarket tomatoes before they're ripe. And, one thing that you should remember, we were just talking earlier about allowing your garden tomatoes to ripen a little more on the counter. It's not a bad plan with the ones you buy at the grocery store too. They are a climacteric fruit. They do continue to ripen after you pick them. If you buy it and it's firm, it's not really ripe yet. And so letting it ripen a bit more on the counter would at least improve those supermarket tomatoes.
Just so we're all clear on this, I'm not using that 100-gallon container to grow tomatoes. I'm doing a test in smart pots in that 100-gallon container growing plueri trees.
You're growing trees in them. Okay, well, you definitely need a big soil volume for that.
Yeah, well, but I'm going to maintain a height of them to about 5 to 6 feet and just see how much fruit I get. The plueri is a cross from Dave Wilson Nursery. It's a cross between plums and cherries. There are several varieties, and I've planted 2 of them because one acts as a pollinizer.
Right. Pollinizer, yeah.
Yes, I'm looking forward just to testing out these smart pots to see if they can handle that kind of a fruit tree and can it produce for years. And one tip I got from Tom Spellman from Dave Wilson Nursery was to grow a fruit tree in a container, you have to control its width. If you control its width so that the branches are no wider than 1.5 times the diameter of the pot it's in, that tree will survive for years.
Wow. Okay, so you're doing summer pruning for size control,
right?
Presumably,
right.
Summer pruning, and you're making sure that it doesn't get too big and woody. Well, that's yeah. The bigger the soil volume, obviously, the better in that situation. But he knows what he's talking about. That's definitely the man to give you the advice on that topic. Fruit trees in containers are always very challenging.